Tonight we begin our series of interviews with candidates running in the final city election on November 7th. Our guest is one of the 8 candidates on the ballot for City Councilor At-Large. We'd like to welcome Payaso. Thank you very much for being with us.
Chris, it's wonderful to see you. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you go. I have to get into a little disclosure here because I remember you in a different...
We were not lovers in a previous life, Chris.
But there was a different incarnation we're talking about here. About 8 years ago, I remember you ran as Kevin McRae for mayor. What's happened since then?
I've come out a bit, and I've been working as a regular citizen, making money. As you probably know, I have property in New Orleans. I have property here. Get up every day, go to work, and try and make the world a better place.
Well, how does being a city councilor help you do that? What's the big deal about being a city councilor?
Well, the city council, as you know, doesn't have a lot of institutional power. We have a strong mayor system here. But the voice of the city council can be incredibly powerful. My number one issue, which I think is the number one issue of many Americans, is health care. And I advocate for universal health care, single payer, like Bernie Sanders has been pushing for years and years. And then my biggest local issue is the schools. The schools need a lot of work. One thing I implore you to ask all the candidates as you have them on, which is a great journalistic thing, thank you very much for doing that. Just as when I ran for mayor, I promised to go to all 125 or so Boston public schools, meet with the students, meet with the teachers, meet with the parents, ask what they need, and come back, report, and work on it. My buildings, I go and visit them to see what the problems are. We just had a debate last night. I put it to the 4 incumbents. They all said education is really, really important, but they won't commit to visiting every one of those schools. There's some very impressive city councilors. We have law degrees from Harvard, law degrees from Boston College, a Boston public school teacher is a city councilor. When those types of people go to the students all across the city, from East Boston to Mattapan to Southie, and they tell the students, look, study hard, listen to your teachers, you can get ahead in life by education. That's how I became a millionaire. I got an education. I worked my way through school. I was on my own since I was 17. But with grit and determination, hard work, America is a place of opportunity, and people can become successful.
Some people get rich by not wasting money. You want to cut down the waste in the schools, and your idea is to, I guess, minimize the funding for transportation. You say this could save about $100 million. I mean, they spend $110 right now, so I guess you want to get rid of almost all the money for transportation.
No, let's, well, thank you for giving me a chance to explain. I don't know exactly what the number is, but as you know, we spend $120 million. There's always going to be a need for buses, special needs kids, busing kids for different opportunities around the city. But I think we can get that busing number down from 110, 120 to in the 20s, 30s perhaps. It's going to be a long process. There's racial problems we've had in this city since the 70s, as we all know about. But we have to tackle these issues. There's all sorts of good reasons for this. Number 1, saving money. Number 2, good for the environment. Number 3, good for traffic. Number 4, good for parents, having schools in their neighborhood. This is going to be a long conversation, but we have to address this. Ayanna Pressley last night talked very passionately about there is racism here in this city and that people have to speak up about it. So I invite her, I invite everyone in the city. Let's have a conversation. Let's put equitable schools in all over the city so the kids don't have to be on a bus for an hour to get to a school. They can go to a school close to them.
But it also sounds like there might be fewer selections that families will have when it comes time to pick a school. I mean, isn't that going to make it harder to achieve equity if these schools aren't going to be competing as much for students?
No, I disagree. I have some ideas, but I'm totally open to suggestions. One thought I've had is that we allow parents, if they want to send their kid to a school somewhere else, that perhaps they can send that child to a school somewhere else, but maybe they need to take care, they need to take the responsibility and accountability for saying, I want a good education for my child, so I'm going to send my kid to a school in another part of the city, but I'm going to get them there. And what that might do, it might add funding to the local school that's maybe not so good, and we might lose a little bit of the funding that is good. And eventually, maybe over time, there'll be more equality. I feel like it's going to need to be a dynamic system going forward. It's not going to be year one, we've achieved equality. That's not going to happen. It's not realistic. But if we have committed people that care about equality, that care about good schools across the city. As you well know, there's, I think, 26 failing schools in the city right now. That's nearly 20%. 20% of our kids are in schools that the state has deemed poor. That's not success.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Pat Payaso, a candidate for City Councilor At-Large. There's a new poll out, and one of the two things that people are most dissatisfied with in Boston right now is the high cost of housing. What do you think should be done about that?
Housing is a supply and demand issue. I applaud the mayor for building and recognizing that we need to build. I think we need to rezone the city. We need to eliminate the BRA. We need to have focus groups in every community. We need to do what many urban planners do on the main streets, Washington Street, Commonwealth Avenue. We need to have more density, street level shopping, upper level residential. We need to have an equitable zoning code so that developers know they can build, and they can build without lots of problems and permitting issues at City Hall, and we can build to provide housing. We also need to make sure that developers have, right now it's 12%, it used to be 20%. Some of the developments that I did when I won BRA proposals in the past, I did 20-25% on mine and still turned a profit. We need to make sure these developers include housing for not just the rich, but for all the residents that we have to serve here in Boston.
City Council was scheduled to vote on a measure to give tenants more protection from eviction without cause. Should there be something like that in the city to require just cause eviction to make it a little more difficult to dislodge people, especially when you got investor-owned properties?
I disagree with this. I own property here in Massachusetts. I have for 25 years. I own rental property in New Orleans. In New Orleans, I can get rid of someone in 3 days if they don't pay their rent. This is just another level of bureaucracy that the way the bill is structured, when I'm going to evict somebody, I have to tell the city, and the city tells the tenant. It is true, we need to educate the tenants. There's strong tenant rights here in Massachusetts, and I applaud those. And there's lots of free legal aid for these tenants. But I don't think, and I've had issues with getting tenants out of my buildings. I think we have strong tenant laws in the city. I think we need to let tenants know that these laws exist and that there's help for them out there. But I am not in favor of yet another level of bureaucracy. You asked me earlier, how do we keep housing costs down? Well, every time I have to send the city another letter, another document, that's another $100 or $200 I have to pay a lawyer to do. All of these things, all of these additional inspections that we have to get just pushes the cost of housing up. We need to be sensible. Tenants need to take responsibility and accountability. They need to pay attention. Landlords need to follow the law. And I think we're in a pretty good situation here in Massachusetts.
Another thing that people are very dissatisfied with, not surprisingly, is gun violence in Boston. Anything that should be done differently than what we've been doing the past few years, at least?
Well, I think this is a big picture issue. I think it comes back to education. It comes back to equity. I think Massachusetts, as you know, has some of the strongest gun laws in the country. It's why our Our gun violence actually, on a per capita basis, is very low compared to my other city where I have property in New Orleans, where gun violence is almost a daily problem there. I don't want to belittle the issue here, but I think the police are doing a good job here in Boston. But I look holistically. We really need to provide equitable education so that every student, every child in the city has access to the education they need so that they can get a good job down the road. I used to be on the board of directors of Madison Park, the trade school in this city. And as Domingos de la Rosa, who you were interviewing, has talked about, he's a graduate. That school has been underfunded. It's had a cycle of principals coming and going. We need to get stability. I've made my excellent living from working in the trades. We need to educate these children and teach them that you don't need a white-collar job. You can get a blue-collar job, and that's a great, respectable job to have in this city.
I do have to ask you one question about campaign finances, because when I looked at your reporting, it certainly looks as if you're free of any outside interest here. But on the other hand,
it is true. I'm not taking campaign contributions from anyone. The politicians in this country are owned by the 1%. We know it, we see it, and I'm not going to be influenced by any money being given to me.
But you've also given yourself a $1 million loan, which gives you more money in your account than all the other at-large council candidates combined. What are you going to spend it on?
Chris, I'd much rather talk about the issues.
Well, this is about what you're like, how you campaign.
I'd like to talk about not about how someone dresses, not about how they look. I'd like to talk about issues. And so, if you'd like to ask questions about issues, we will. I have $1 million in my campaign account. It's true. My new campaign video, I think, is going to come out tonight. We've been working on it for the last 3 or 4 days. I think it's going to be a real big hit. You can see it on Pat Payaso's YouTube channel, and I invite everyone to come out and see it and see how it is that I'm spending money.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Chris, thank you very much.
Pat Payaso, candidate for City Councilor at Large. And we'll have more news in just a moment.